So great, I think we can start. So my name is Ravi. I'm the co-founder CEO of Zeev. And today's webinar is a repeat of a webinar where we are going to do a very brief and high-level introduction to what is happening in blockchain, what blockchain is, and what are some of the most compelling use cases like NFTs and DeFi. And you can post your questions on the chat, and I'll keep on answering the questions as we move. So before that, just a brief about Zeev. So Zeev is a Web3 startup, and we are into infrastructure as a service. So Zeev is a no-code platform. So when you are building your dApp and you want to connect to blockchain, you can use Zeev to Zeev APIs to connect to the blockchains. We support 20 plus protocols today, all the major protocols, whether it be public protocols like Ethereum, Polygon, Binance, Avalanche, etc., or permission protocols like Fabric, R3 Coda, etc. So now, starting with the concept of blockchain tech, and I'm assuming that most of the participants today are new to blockchain or have just some basic details about blockchain. So I'll make it very high level, but if you have any questions, I can dig in deeper. So first, giving a concept or perspective on Web3. So I think today Web3 and blockchain are being used together, but Web3 has been powered by blockchain, but then other emerging tech are also enabling Web3. So what exactly is Web3? So if you see how the internet has evolved over a period of time, in late 90s and early 2000, what the kind of internet we had was called Web 1.0. And what that internet was, we had applications like yahoo.com or msn.com. Corporates started creating their own websites. But if you see most of these internet sites, they were static in nature, and they were one way. They were providing information to users. So whether it be news portals or corporate websites or any other kind of informative brochures, they were all informative in nature. And the information was given by the platform provider or the site provider, and the users used to consume that information. So that's why we call it read-only web, because there was no interaction user was doing with the web. And then slowly what happened, first, forums and blogs started coming in where users could put in comments, user could like or share a post. So some of those interactions started happening. And then, further two-way exchange happened. So when we saw Facebook coming in, and then advanced discussion forums started cropping up. So people started interacting with each other. Now they could not only consume content, but they can post content and others can consume. And then a lot of other social interactions started happening. So you could share your post and other people can comment on it. And then, there were chat threads and discussion forum threads that started happening. And of course, with mobility and expansion of social web, including Instagram and few other social channels, the experiences became better and better. That was Web 2.0, where we also call it read and write, where you could consume content as well as you can contribute content and interact on it or collaborate on the content. But if you see till Web 2.0, still largely the internet has been the movement or transfer of information. Initially it was one way, then it became two way, but still it was information only. There was no way to exchange value over the internet. And what I mean by that is that if you see, let's say, your e-commerce where you make a payment, still it's an exchange of information only. There's no transactional value that happens. When you buy something off Amazon, Then at that point of time, you put in your credit card, you make the payment. So you're authorizing your bank, you're passing an information to your bank to make the payment to Amazon or Amazon seller for a specific set of goods. And Amazon gets the order, and the order is relayed to the seller dispatches the order, and the payment is settled by the bank. So if you see, it requires a lot of intermediaries to create that e-commerce transaction. So it's not that you are actually exchanging value. Yes, on the top of it, it seems like, but underlying, it's passing of information, and based on information, actions are taken to settle a transaction or complete a e-commerce transaction. Vis-a-vis that, with Web3, you can actually exchange value online. And that's what blockchain brought around, where, with Bitcoin came the technology where you can transfer something of value to start with crypto tokens, but then later on, it can be anything of value that can be transacted between two users with proper transaction and settlement happening nearly at the same time. So there are no intermediaries which are helping you to complete the transaction. The transaction can be completed between two users using the tech or the network. So that is what has changed, where you can read, write, and you can execute, or you can transact value. So that is one of the major hallmark of blockchain and Web3. The second piece, if you see, what has happened in the case of Web 1.0, Web 2.0, the whole idea of internet was to be a decentralized internet. But slowly and slowly, some of the incumbent players started becoming bigger and bigger. And eventually, the web today that we have, most of the larger players, through their centralized databases and centralized platforms, control most of the user information. So if you see Facebook, all your interactions, everything is owned by Facebook, and Facebook can use that information for any purposes. So that was another area that started become a concern, because the whole idea of internet was to make it very democratic, very decentralized, but eventually, slowly it became centralized. And that's again the whole philosophy behind Web3 is that it should be user driven, and decentralized ledger technologies enable that user can control the data. So it will reduce the privacy concerns, it will reduce the security concerns, and it will also add another option for users. Once you control your data as a user, you can also monetize your data. Today, your data is monetized. So today, your data is owned by someone else, and it is monetized by someone else. With Web3, the user would be able to control their data, and they would be able to also monetize it in a much more effective way. Some monetization is already happening in the creator economy. So you create an account on a publisher platform, you contribute articles, or let's say you are a Google ad publisher, you're publishing ads on behalf of the Google, and Google shares some revenue with you. But the revenue distribution that used to be there 20 years back has drastically changed. And now the revenue that is being shared with the creator is very small, and the platform takes most of the revenue. So even if the data monetization models are available in Web 2, but they are not very impactful, they are not very fair or justified to the creators. So in a nutshell, Web 3, one, it allows you to transact value online. And once you start appreciating NFTs and DeFi, all of these use cases are based on transacting value. And the second is Web3 is going to revolutionize the whole creator economy, because here user can control their data, and user can decide when to monetize, how to monetize, and how much to monetize. So these are some of the core tenets of Web3. So this was just with some examples. Like when we talk about the Web 1.0, the read-only, we had AOL, we had Amazon, Yahoo.com, and few of the news portals, corporate websites, and so on and so forth. And with read and write, the social economy, the social web started taking place. YouTube, Insta, and a lot of shared economy use cases also started coming in with Airbnb, Uber, etc. And now with Web3, one, as I mentioned, you can transact value. There are sophisticated networks like Ethereum, Polygon, Bitcoin, etc. And then at the same time, there's a ownership or creator economy. So if you see OpenSea, you can, as a creator, you can go to OpenSea, you can use your creative design or creative artwork, you can tokenize it and you can start selling. You're not dependent on anyone. And at each point of time, you are owning the asset. You are the de facto, you are the custodian of the asset. So, and of course, as web has evolved, the tools have also evolved. In Web 1.0, there were simple username passwords. With Web 2.0, social logins came into picture. And we know that we have been using social logins and they are so user-friendly. And in Web 3, since you as a user are going to own the asset, whether it be data, whether it be tokens, whether it be anything of value. So there are decentralized non-custodial wallets like MetaMask, etc., through which you connect to different platforms. So MetaMask is a wallet where you have your own private key and your own identity, a cryptographic identity, through which you connect to an application and you do the transactions. So there's no separate login or creating an account, etc. Your cryptographic identity itself is the account. So this is what a brief about how Web3 is solving some of the major challenges that we have been seeing with the internet today. So a brief about when we say decentralized network, what exactly we mean. So in decentralized network, what happens is that the data is not residing in a centralized server. So the centralized network looks like this, where there is a single authority who is managing all the data, and rest of we as consumers are consuming that data or using that data. So we have access to it through a client machines, maybe a browser, maybe a desktop client app, or different kind of interfaces, maybe a mobile app. But end of the day, all the data resides in a centralized database. So that is what a centralized network is. Vis-a-vis that decentralized network, the data resides, there are multiple nodes, and the data is synced up across all the nodes. So just imagine an Ethereum network, which has got hundreds and thousands of nodes, and the data is synced up across all the nodes. You can connect with any node, and you can get a full copy of Ethereum database. So that is what a distributed network is, where the data resides not in a centralized server, but it's completely decentralized. And decentralized network is what is empowering the blockchain networks, where all the data is decentralized. There's no centralized control authority, and anybody can get access to all the data by connecting to any of the nearby nodes. So if you see why this becomes important and what are the core differences. So centralized, there is a third party control. There's a third party which is controlling that data. And there are various challenges to that. Now with control, of course, there are security challenges, because then there's a single point of failure. So availability can become an issue, and they can be hacked because there's a centralized control, and they can be abused. Like we have seen a lot of privacy concerns that came out of Facebook, and there have been a lot of hacks that have happened out of various credit bureau platforms or financial platforms, etc., where some of the critical credit card data or user identity data were compromised. So all this happened because a third party is controlling that data. Vis-a-vis that, if you see a decentralized user controls the data at every point of time, even if you are giving the custody to someone else, still you know that you have given the custody, you can revoke the access. So you have full control over how the data is being managed and how the user can use it. And of course, since in a distributed or a decentralized network, since the data resides in multiple nodes, like in the case of Ethereum of thousands and thousands of nodes, so even if you hack one node, does not matter. So that's why we say that there's no single point of failure. You will always have availability. Even if 10 nodes go down or 100 node goes down, it doesn't matter. Still the network will keep on running. There will be 100% availability of data. And of course, as far as usability is concerned, they're centralized because we are used to Web 1.1.2, which has evolved over the last 20-25 years. Of course, they are much more user-friendly. Web 3 being new, still people are not very comfortable, using MetaMask or managing and securing their private keys, because we have been used to having centralized parties manage all these pieces at their level. But with Web3, of course, when you say, if you want to take control over your data, you want to take control over your tokens. Like, the latest issue we have seen with FTX, these centralized exchanges, of course, they are much more user-friendly than a decentralized exchange. And that's why still most of the transactions happen through centralized exchanges. But we have seen Celsius in the past, FTX recently, that there is a price. Now, all the retail investors, they have lost their money. And I don't know if any of them would be able to recover even part of it. So until this happens, of course, centralized exchanges look a better alternative from a user-friendly perspective as decentralized exchange. But since you do not control the data, it's ultimately the platform owner can decide what to do with your funds. Okay, so I'll just give a blockchain basics. I would not delve deeper into this because this is altogether a different subject. But if some of the participants would be interested, I can conduct a separate session to tell you how blockchain works. But the whole idea is that there are no intermediaries. You just imagine a network, a different nodes, and a distributed ledger, which is where the data is residing on different machines. Now, whenever a new transaction happens, the transaction first needs to be validated. The parties who are doing the transaction needs to be validated. And then this data needs to be written on a distributed ledger. So who is going to decide who is going to write the new data, or who is going to write the update the database with new set of transactions? That is where miners or stakers or validators come in, and they are entities who validate the transactions and then put them into blockchain, and they are incentivized to do it. Again, in any of the public protocols, anyone can become a miner or validator. So that's why it's very open. Again, it may seem that third party is involved, but third party is completely non-biased, and anyone can become. You can go and you can become a Bitcoin miner or Ethereum validator. And once the data is written on the blockchain, in the blockchain ledger, the data is immutable. It cannot be changed. So then we say that a finality has happened. The transaction has been completely settled. And once the transaction is settled, the transaction is complete. So if you see, this is one major feature of blockchain where transaction and settlement are happening almost nearly at the same time. And this is something very big as compared to the current traditional technologies, where it seems that the transaction has been settled, but it's not. So we do go to ATM, withdraw cash, and we see our balance has been updated immediately, right? But let's say you're holding an account with ICICI Bank and you go to HDFC ATM and you do the transaction. So you can withdraw the cash, your mobile app, or you will get an SMS, your balance has been updated. But the actual settlement of this transaction between these two banks takes a good amount of time. So the settlement does not happen nearly at the same time as the transaction. The same goes in the capital market. You are buying a stock. How the settlement of that stock happens, that takes a good amount of time. Whether it be remittances, international remittances still take 3 to 4 days, starting from 1 to 2 days to even 3 weeks, depending on which country and you're remitting from or to. So, and the reason is that, the settlement layer is managed by the intermediaries. It is highly inefficient and it takes a huge amount of time. And then that's why the traditional technologies are also expensive when we talk about financial transactions. And the expense is due to multiple parties managing the settlement layer. In the case of blockchain, the settlement layer pretty much works along with the transaction layer. So transaction and settlement happens at the same time. And that's the reason most of the financial institutions who are looking at blockchain may not be doing it for innovation purposes, but at least for increasing the efficiency of transactions, how to reduce the cost of transactions. The whole initiatives of CBDC, centrally banked digital currencies done by most of the governments, including RBI, which made an announcement a week back about e-rupee. The whole concept is to use distributed technologies to make the transactions more efficient. The bookkeeping of transactions or the backend management of the assets and transactions make it much more effective using blockchain. So why blockchain? As I mentioned, it is immutable, so you can trust the data. Once it has been written, it cannot be changed. There are no intermediaries, so it reduces the cost. It makes the transaction much more efficient. And then at the same time, transaction and settlement are happening nearly at the same time. So it reduces the overall time of transactions that happens. And it is highly secure because the data is residing in multiple nodes. There are multiple copies of it. So there's a huge redundancy built into the architecture itself. So there's no single point of failure. It is highly secure. And then one point, real-time tracking, because all the data is visible to everyone. If you talk about public protocols, you can go back and you can see all the transactions that have happened on Ethereum since day one. You can download that data on your machine. You can run any kind of forensics or analytics on top of it. So every set of data is tracked and visible to everyone. Just to give a difference between what public and permission blockchains are. So public blockchains are like Ethereum, Bitcoin, Polygon, etc., where anyone can read the data, anyone can write the data by becoming a validator, and so anyone can join the network. But when blockchain was being adopted in the enterprises, just a second. When enterprises started adopting blockchain, they didn't want everybody to access every set of data. So for example, somebody is launching a supply chain track and trace platform or supply chain invoicing marketplace. Of course, the enterprise would not want one supplier to see the data of another supplier, one buyer to see the data of another buyer. So there are obvious requirements of access controls. That only if Walmart is launching a supply chain track and trace platform, only the Walmart vendors would be able to join the platform, not anyone. So the concept of permission blockchains came in, and what permission blockchain does is it allows the permissioned actors to join the network. So there are a set of rules who can write to the blockchain, who can access the blockchain or read the blockchain. And then there are various regulations and compliances being built into the blockchain itself. So that's what a permission. Which is hybrid blockchains, where you have flavors of both the blockchains. So it may be that only certain actors are able to write to the transaction, but the transactions are visible to everyone. So so some pieces of public and some pieces of permission blockchains that are being a lot of hybrid blockchains have come into the market now. So now coming to the tokenization and NFT. So first I'll talk about tokenization. So what tokenization is? So if you see Bitcoin, which was the first application of blockchain and which gave blockchain technology, there is a crypto token called Bitcoin, and that Bitcoin can be owned and can be transacted by anyone. So it's a token which has got a value in itself. But then when smart contracts came in with Ethereum, and then people started creating use cases within the business domain or within the enterprise domain, then pretty much anything of value can be tokenized, or a token can be created which represents something of value, and it can be transacted using that token. So that is what we mean by tokenization. So you take an asset, it may be a mutual fund, it may be a bond, it may be a physical asset or tangible asset, and you can create a tokenized version of it, a digital replica of it, and then that token can be transacted over the blockchain network. So using blockchain, you can tokenize any kind of asset, and that token can then do all the transactions, making the best of all the features of blockchain. So again, all the features that I mentioned about data immutability or faster transactions, and then transaction and settlement happening at the same time, you actually get all the benefits of blockchain tech by tokenizing. And tokenization is not something new. We understand tokenization. They have been used in the form of loyalty points or royalty points. So various form of tokens we have already seen. And blockchain-based tokenization brings all the benefits of blockchain and makes the transaction much more seamless. So, and there are various standards based on the standards. So one of the most common, which was launched in 2017, was ERC20 standard. And ERC20 standard, you create fungible tokens. So tokens which are of same value, like the fiat that we have. So every 2,000 rupee note is equal to another 2,000 rupee note in terms of value. You can exchange that without even worrying that the value is changed. The same goes for 1 gram of gold, of the same 24 karat gold is pretty much exchangeable. So these are called fungible assets. And when you tokenize a fungible asset, they are called fungible tokens. ERC20 was one of the standard. Most of the tokens that you see in the market are ERC20 fungible tokens. And then, a new standard came in ERC721, where you can create tokens which are unique in nature. So there are a lot of non-fungible assets like, real estate, etc., or creative art. So a Mona Lisa painting is entirely different from any other painting. So once you tokenize something of unique value or unique attributes or non-fungible assets, they are called non-fungible tokens. ERC 721 and 1155 are the standards which are used for tokenizing non-fungible assets. So why tokenization? As I mentioned, you get all the benefits of blockchain. So one, the blockchain networks are global in nature. Anyone can join the network, so there's a financial inclusion. And since anyone can join, it leads to higher liquidity. Because today what happens is, if an asset can be transacted only among this small group of people, of course, it will be highly illiquid. But if there can be more people who can trade or transact in that token or an asset, of course, it helps in increasing liquidity into that asset, and the transaction become much more efficient and effective. And then, as I mentioned, globalized access, you have highly efficient transactions. There are no intermediaries who are slowing down the transaction or adding to the cost of the transaction. So they are very cost effective also. And at the same time, when we talk about NFT later, one of the classic feature of NFT is the ownership of the asset. So with NFT, you can provably say that you own the asset in a very non-custodial manner. So I've already covered this, fungible and non-fungible assets. So now coming to non-fungible assets. So non-fungible assets have become very popular in the last 2 years. And so initially, most of the popularity started with digital collectibles. And we have seen the growth of digital collectibles with a lot of avatar projects and various other art projects that have come on OpenSea, Rarible, quite a few platforms. But now NFT is going beyond digital assets. So now first it is extending to other digital assets like digital financial assets. It can be invoices, it can be your insurance, or it can be lending portfolio. So there are various areas where NFTs are now being used to tokenize some of the other digital assets, especially financial, and then also extending to real world assets like real estate or carbon credits or bonds and etc. So so NFT is not just digital collectibles. Now you will start seeing NFTs in the next 5 years. You will see a lot of real world assets being tokenized as NFT or fungible tokens, and using blockchain to have the transactions. Capital market is seeing a lot of adoption where different kind of capital assets, like whether bonds or mutual funds, etc., are being tokenized. So to increase the efficiency of transactions and make it much more inclusive. So as I mentioned, NFT started with digital content creators or artists, they started tokenizing their artwork and started selling it online. And anybody who buys that, has an absolute control over it. So there are no copyright issues also. Once you have a complete control over the asset, you can use whichever way, and you can probably prove that you are the owner of a specific asset. So you are actually buying an ownership. You're not relying on any third party to prove the ownership. And then, gaming has got a lot of use cases of tokenization, because we have seen that each game has its own ecosystem, and that ecosystem does not communicate to the ecosystem outside. So if you're creating some in-game assets, either by playing or by earning or by buying, you cannot trade these in-game assets with outside the game. So a lot of Web3 games have come in, and a lot of traditional games are now adopting blockchain, where they are tokenizing the in-gaming assets so that those assets can be traded in the secondary market outside the game. So it again will disrupt the whole in-game assets industry, where these kind of assets can be traded. And then investments and collaterals, financial assets, as I mentioned, domain names, music is one of the upcoming category where royalties are being managed using NFTs and smart contracts. So that is also playing a massive role. So this was pretty much on NFT. Any questions so far, so that I can talk about NFTs and tokenization before we jump onto DeFi? I don't see any questions here, so I'll move on, and then if you still have any questions, you can ask at the end of the webinar. So I hope okay, I've got, I think, the first question. Okay, yeah, thanks, Raj. Okay, so let's let's move on. Any further questions? We'll cover after we cover the DeFi. So before getting into this, I'll just so people are very much confused about cryptocurrencies. Some say coins and tokens, etc. So end of the day, everything is a token. Cryptocurrency word came in or was the first word to be used in a very popular way, and the reason was because the blockchain tech came in through Bitcoin. Bitcoin was the first application, and Bitcoin is something that is being used as a payment. The whole idea was to create a separate currency, which is powered by blockchain. And that's why it was called cryptocurrency, and it was using cryptography and cryptographic methods and ID, etc. So it was called cryptocurrency. And that's why cryptocurrencies caught on. But now if you see platforms like Augur, which are providing predictive platform. So this token is being used for various purposes. It may be a utility. When it is being part of the platform, like in the case of Ethereum network, the Ether is the utility token within the network. So if you want to do any transaction on Ethereum, or you want to deploy a smart contract, and you want to do any of the smart contract transactions, you would require to pay gas fee in the form of Ether. So then Ether has become a utility token. So it's not per se the definition of currency. Similarly, if you see other platforms where people are tokenizing equity, shares in a company, so then the token is representing shares of a company. So similarly, token can represent anything. So crypto tokens is more commonly used now, and cryptocurrencies are only being used for use cases where the token is used only for payments or transactions. There's no other purpose of it, like in the case of Bitcoin. So now let's jump on to decentralized finance. So the way we talked about evolution of internet, let's briefly talk about the whole financial technology, how it has evolved. So banking has been quite old. I won't go, behind a lot. Let's talk about fintech revolution. So before fintech, what we had seen, most of the transactions we had to go to bank, and whether we want to withdraw cash, deposit check, or do any kind of transactions, the only way was branch banking. We used to go to the bank branch and we used to do all these transactions. And then came the technology revolution and fintech came in. And with fintech, we have seen from a user perspective, things have been revolutionized. Fintech has disrupted the whole banking and financial industry in the last 20 years, starting with PayPal, which, make it very easy for freelancers being paid from US customers, or, it was easy to start making payments and then settling those payments. So user layer has completely been disrupted with fintech. And why I'm insisting on user layer is, so now we don't need to go to branch. We as a user can use mobile app to make the transactions or web app. We can simply go to ATM to withdraw cash and even deposit cash. And the checks are getting, out of style now. Most of the transactions are being done using NFT, NEFT or RTGS. And now with UPI coming in, the smaller transactions have become even much simpler, much easier. Just by using mobile phone or mobile number or scanning the QR code, we can make a transaction. So we have seen that, the fintech has, and it has changed the lending and rest of the other investment products also. Investing into stock, opening a demat account and start trading into mutual funds or stocks has become very, very easy. Applying for an IPO, just imagine filling up a form offline and then depositing and then getting your shares in a settlement time of 5 days. Things have dramatically and drastically changed in the last 20 years. But fintech has enabled only the user layer, the front-end layer. Still the back-end layer, the settlement layer is still very bulky, very inefficient, and being managed by banks and a lot of other intermediaries. And that is the reason fintech has not solved one problem or quite a few problems. One of the major problem is the cost of transactions are still very high. The transactions the settlement takes a huge amount of time. So time and cost, of course, are two major challenges. And the third, we are giving away too much trust and custody to a third party. Yes, banks which have been in existence for the last 50 years, 70 years, we know are very difficult to fail. But if you see the 2008 crisis, we have seen that, greed and personal ambitions can create a crisis of this size, where the whole world went into recession. So 2008 actually showed that the centralized finance or traditional finance has got issues beyond cost and time. There are issues of trust also, and the whole financial system can collapse, or a large bank can collapse, or an investment bank or an insurance player can collapse, just because we are relying on them to make sound or wise investments, but just because of personal greed or personal reasons, people were trading into assets that they were not supposed to. So two set of challenges. One, the backend settlement layer is still very outdated, is ridden with a lot of intermediaries, leading to higher cost and higher transaction time. And the second, there's too much trust on the traditional players. And if you see the case of FTX, again, it's too much trust, lack of regulations. Thankfully, in the case of traditional banking, still there are high level of regulations by the central bank and the government, so that we can safely say that our fiat is pretty much safe, right? Centralized exchanges were even bad avatars of that. But the idea is that, centralized entities still will be ridden with all these kind of issues. And we don't know when another 2008 kind of crisis can come in, because we don't know. We don't have any visibility or what is happening behind the scene. So lack of transparency leads to lack of trust. And of course, transaction side issues are already there. So that is where how Bitcoin was born in 2008, after the financial crisis started. Lehman Brothers failed, and that's how Bitcoin came into existence. So the whole idea is that we do need, or we do want to make financial tech or the whole financial industry also decentralized, where the user can start having, it's not something that can be a completely changed from centralized to decentralized. It will happen over a period of time, but the idea is to give more control over to the users, or more custody to the users, so that the chances of abuse of centralized control can be reduced. Second, using technology like blockchain, the settlement can be brought very closer to the transaction layer, and thereby we can remove intermediaries who are not playing a good role. Again, I would not say that all the intermediaries can be removed. What I mean to say is that qualitative intermediation still would be required, but non-qualitative intermediation can be removed, and that will help reduce the cost as well as the time to do the transactions. So just, what a centralized finance called CeFi or decentralized finance is. So this is a gradation. So are the assets non-custodial? If they are not, then we are talking about CeFi, like, having our bank accounts in banks, all our money residing with the banks. And if yes, then can anyone censor a transaction's execution? Then there is a CeFi intermediary DeFi settlement. So idea is that you are holding the assets in a non-custodial way, but still anyone can censor a transaction. You do a transaction, but somebody can cancel it, or somebody can stop that transaction. And then can anyone censor the protocol's execution, the platform which is helping you make the transactions? Then it's DeFi, but it's centrally governed. And then the actual DeFi would be where you have all the funds are non-custodial. You as a user control your funds. And at the same time, whenever you do a transaction, there's a complete transparency. Nobody can censor a transaction. And the people who are running the platform, or who started the platform, there's a proper DAO, or a decentralized autonomous organization, which is managing it. So all the decisions which are happening on the platform are done by voting by different people who are holding the tokens for that platform. So that will be a true decentralized or DeFi platform. So yes, we are right now at the early stages, or you can say centrally governed DeFi is something we are already seeing, like Aave, etc. And they are also Uniswap, Aave, some of the DeFi platforms. They are now has started their DAO and governance tokens, and through the governance tokens, a lot of governance is now becoming decentralized. So yes, we are moving from partially decentralized to a complete decentralized scenario. It's going to take a period of time, but the benefits or the value being given by DeFi has already seen that we are solving some of the real challenges of centralized finance. So just a diagram to show, in a centralized, we know Bob sends money to Alice through his bank, and the bank is the centralized transaction as well as settlement platform. And whichever there may be number of intermediaries who are impacting a transaction. Let's say transaction is happening between two banks. So there's an interbank settlement also needs to happen. So there are intermediaries doing that. In the case of decentralized transaction, there's a network, and the user are communicating directly with each other using the network. And their transactions are being validated and stored onto blockchain using miners or validators, and the transaction and settlement takes place. And one of the beauty of blockchain-based transaction is that I've covered in the DeFi webinar is atomicity. So if Bob makes a transaction to Alice, and that transaction leads to, let's say, go through 3 steps, what happens in a centralized scenario? So let's say you're doing a remittance from US to a small place in India, and the transaction is going through 3 banks. And if the transaction gets held up in any of the bank, it will be held up there for till the time that bank releases this, right? But in the case of decentralized transaction, what happens is there's a property called atomicity or atomic transactions, where if you have sent a transaction and the transaction gets stuck, then the whole transaction will be reversed in such a way that the transaction, it will be like transaction never happened. So if Bob sends to Alice, and let's say Alice has, promised something in return, then a smart contract will ensure that either the transaction takes place or it is completely reversed. So there cannot be a situation where asset from Bob has reached to Alice and the asset from Alice has not gone to Bob. Today, in the case of centralized scenario, we have escrow mechanisms, which again, an intermediary we need to resort. It's an expensive, time-taking process to enable transactions between two parties, where two parties are exchanging something in a transaction. In a case of decentralized transaction with atomicity, you can be sure that the smart contract will ensure that the settlement takes place without any further escrow. So uses of DeFi. So DeFi is now touching upon all the financial products that we see in the traditional finance, whether it be deposits, earning interest on your deposits, lending and borrowing, stable coins, asset management. As I mentioned, capital market is again seeing a lot of use cases within DeFi. Insurance with decentralized insurance, decentralized exchanges where you can transact with full custody of your assets. So it's pretty much covering all the financial products that we today see in the traditional finance. So that was a very brief. I ran a full-fledged webinar series of 4 webinars on DeFi. It was concluded last month, but I'm going to reinitiate that webinar. And this time we'll have participants. We are going to choose a time where, participants, a lot of participants from Australia and Middle East have shown interest to join the webinar. So we'll choose a time which will be amicable for all the 3 countries. So we'll restart that webinar. If you want to know or go deeper into each and every component, how DeFi works, how these platforms work, how as a user, you can be on the trading side or on the developer side, or you're creating a Web3 startup, you can see what are the architecture components of DeFi and how you can make use of it. So, do follow us and you will, get to know the upcoming webinars. Now, I think I can take up some questions. So one question from Karthik. Frankly, I'm not very much. So what if all the networks are being, and if we have to pay for the assets we use from the internet? Okay, so if you're talking about, free assets or open source, these are various concepts. And the best part is, to answer you, Karthik, that the whole blockchain technology, fortunately, adopted this by itself. When Bitcoin was launched, Bitcoin was completely open source. So it's not just you can use Bitcoin network to do transactions, but you can actually copy the Bitcoin code and create your own Bitcoin-like network. And that's what, Bitcoin code was forked and Litecoin was created and Bitcoin Cash was created and various other networks were created out of Bitcoin. And similarly, if you see Ethereum or all the smart contracts in DeFi, if you go to Uniswap, you can actually pick up the Uniswap smart contracts off the GitHub, and you can use that smart contract and create your own Uniswap-like platform. Or, for example, Aave-like platform. So the best part is that in the case of blockchain world, by default, all the smart contract applications, all the smart contracts are open source. So you can audit them, and that is the beauty of it, because to bring in full trust and transparency, if smart contracts become a black hole, then people will not be able to trust it, even if the smart contracts are residing on blockchain, right? So that's why pretty much everything is open source. The second, as far as free resources is concerned, that I think is not going to change. Free resource is a means by someone to offer their service. It's part of a business model. So yes, the newer business models are coming in. Existing established business models are going to still be there. They are not going to be removed. What I mean to say is that, things will start changing. So as I mentioned, I took an example of creator economy. So today also data monetization models are there. If you are creating videos, you can go to, there are quite a few influencer platforms where you can put in your viral videos and brands can buy it. Like, people have made use of TikTok as a platform. Some of the young budding artists who were not getting any opportunity, they started posting their videos. They started shooting videos at home and started posting it, got an opportunity, and some of them have got breaks also in proper professional streams. We have seen this with YouTube. I was a very big fan of TVF when it was launched, and now we are actually seeing a lot of TVF actors in the mainstream cinema or TV, right? So these models are going to be there. What I meant to say was that these free applications again will be there because that's part of the business model of the platform who is running it, right? The idea is that whenever somebody is monetizing that data, whether it's fair and justifiable, do I control, can somebody abuse that data? So all these data monetization models and marketplaces will still be there, but with better control, lesser privacy issues, lesser security issues. That is what the change would be. Any other question? Yeah, so this is pretty much I wanted to cover. If you want to learn more about Zeev, about me, connect with me on LinkedIn. Join our social channels, LinkedIn and Telegram and Twitter, and we'll keep you abreast about all the developments which are happening. One very, 2-3 very interesting initiatives we have started, and you can get more information on the website. One is we have started releasing a weekly video on blockchain news. So in a video format on YouTube and on LinkedIn, you can see what is happening in the blockchain world. The second, we have launched Zeev University, where we are providing a lot of training for any Web2 developers who want to become a Web3 developer. We are providing proper training courses as well as webinars, hackathons. We have partnered with all the major protocols like Polygon, Shardium, etc., and doing a lot of joint initiatives for people who want to get into Web3 space, either as a initial learner to even advanced courses. So stay in touch. Cheers and thanks everyone for listening. Thank you. I think I've okay. So Dr. Vinod has asked about, can you explain about atomicity? Yeah. So in DeFi it becomes even more important. So as I mentioned, what happens is, let's say I'll take an example of a flash loan, right? So for example, or you are doing transactions of multiple DeFi apps. So what you are doing is, let's say you have Ether today, right? You don't want to sell Ether, but you are seeing some arbitrage opportunity on a DEX. So you want to now to use that arbitrage opportunity, you need USDT. So what you can do is you go to Aave, you put in your Ether, you take USDT, you go to the DEX, and you can do the transaction, and then go back to Aave and then return the funds and get your Ether back. Now, one option is that you can do this completely manually, step by step. Then, of course, you will not see atomicity much. You will not be able to appreciate atomicity. Atomicity is there in every transaction, but let's say you have automated this whole flow so that starting from first transaction to the last transaction, everything is connected with each other. In that scenario, if one of the transactions fails, typical example is flash loans. And I had a full slide on flash loans where transaction A happens, then B, C, D, there are multiple steps to it. And if one of the step gets stuck or error or whatever, the whole transaction will be reversed. So you can study more about flash loans and you will understand atomicity in much better detail. Karthik has asked about semi-fungible concepts. So semi-fungible are, again, there's a new ERC standard which is launched. It's 3000 something, 35 something. I'm forgetting the standard. So there, the concept of semi-fungible, where you combine the properties of fungible and non-fungible. So as I mentioned, fungible tokens, you have no uniqueness. All the tokens are similar to each other. They can be freely exchanged, and there's a quantity. So you can mint hundreds of thousands of gold tokens, right? And all the tokens are same with each other. That's a fungibility where uniqueness is not there, but quantity is there. Vis-a-vis that, if you see NFT, if you have one unique asset, you are creating one token of it. So you have uniqueness, but there's only one token. Now, let's say there are use cases in real estate and various other asset classes where you want to have quantity also and you want to have uniqueness also. So that's where the semi-fungible tokens come into picture. So from anonymous attendee, what is Eve's business model? So we are a Web3 infrastructure as a service platform. So our business model is very simple. It's for nodes, it's per node per month kind of pricing. For APIs, it's per month subscription. We do have a free forever plan, which provides 10 million API units. Pretty much, more than sufficient for anyone who is building a dApp till the time you get into production and start doing good number of transactions. You can actually use Z for completely free forever. So there are monthly subscription charges or per node per month if you are looking for a dedicated node. And Zeev also provides bring your own cloud and managed. So in the case of managed, we manage the cloud as well as the infra and all the endpoints. In the case of bring your own cloud, in fact, you can use your AWS, Google or Azure or DigitalOcean account, and you can use Zeev to deploy your nodes, manage, monitor, analytics. So we handle everything for to manage your infrastructure, and still everything is running on your end. So that way, it's a highly decentralized architecture. V has asked, how can we prevent cases like FTX to happen? Is it a decentralized platform? Why aren't we able to trace the so-called hackers that SBF claimed to be perpetrated? So, so there are two areas where people are talking about how to prevent cases like FTX. One is regulations. And so one of the concepts which I wrote a note a year back and is gaining a lot of buzz in the last 2 days is proof of reserves. That every centralized exchange needs to make it open, that anyone can see what kind of reserves they are holding, what kind of tokens they are holding, what is the value, and whether they are solvent or not, right? So, so that is one, bringing more transparency on the operations or the token holding of those, the kind of assets and liabilities they have. So that is one. The second, of course, is decentralized exchanges. So decentralized exchanges are there like Uniswap, PancakeSwap, etc., where you do not pass on the custody of your tokens to the exchange. Whenever you want to, let's say you have Ether, you want to buy USDT, you go to Uniswap and you say that there's a small calculator. You put in 1 Ether, it will show you based on the current rates that you are getting 1200 USDT. You submit, you sign your transaction using your MetaMask private key, and that's it. Your Ether will go out, USDT will come in. And it will be a final transaction. So it's not going to happen that your Ether goes out and nothing will come in. And so every point of time, you are holding the custody of your funds. Vis-a-vis FTX or Binance or Coinbase, etc., centralized exchanges. So I think centralized exchanges will remain. As I mentioned, they're very user-friendly. And we as users who are not very comfortable holding funds in a non-custodial manner, managing our private keys, still will continue to use centralized exchanges. So they're not going to go away, but they need more regulations, more transparency on their operations so that FTX kind of scenarios does not happen. And yeah, so as far as centralized exchanges, of course, you won't be able to hack the hackers also. In the case of decentralized, whenever hacks have happened on Bridge, etc., at least people are able to see where the funds have been hacked and put into. And some of the earlier addresses, there are a lot of people who have been looking at those addresses. Whenever funds are moved from those addresses, there's a trigger that goes. So still you cannot know the identity behind a wallet, but still you can run a lot of forensics and see how the funds are being moved in a decentralized networks. Yeah, so you can connect me on LinkedIn and you can chat me with on LinkedIn. My name is Ravi Chamria. You can search for me. My surname being not a common surname, you will be easily find me on LinkedIn. So one question is, do all the NFTs unique without considering the token attached? No, so if somebody is creating a token of a fungible asset, then it's a different scenario. But if you're creating an asset, if there's an asset is non-fungible, the token that will power it is non-fungible token. So yes, it will always be unique. Now with fractional tokenization coming into picture, you can break that token into multiple fractions so that multiple owners can use it. So there can be a multiple ownership, but still that NFT itself will be unique because it is it's backing an asset which is unique. Shweta has asked, what is the actual purpose of stable coins? So as you know, the whole idea after Bitcoin came in, people wanted to use tokens for business transactions. So I'm taking just an example of business transactions. It can be various kind of transactions. The problem is that we cannot use crypto, which are very volatile in nature. People are not able to store them for longer run because they don't know when the price can drop by 50% or go up by 50%. And similarly, for business transactions, you do not want to deal in such volatile currencies. Let's say you are a freelancer, you are taking payments in Ether, and you have done a job worth $1,000. You have taken a payment in Ether, and the value of Ether suddenly goes down overnight by 10%, 20%. So no fault of yours, you have lost the value, right? So for all these use cases where volatility is a challenge, the concept of stable coins came in. Stable coins are again tokens which are backed by fiat. The commonest, it's not always fiat. The commonest stable coin are fiat stable coins like USDT or USDC, which are backed by $1. So each token is backed by $1. And the value will always remain $1 only. Sometimes you see on the exchanges, the values has become 0.99. That's losing a peg when the underlying asset has got an issue or there's a demand supply gap. But otherwise they are stable coin. Their value will always remain $1. So now all the freelancers who are taking payment in crypto normally do that in USDT or USDC because they know that while the transaction, after the transaction, even if they are holding it, their value remains same. And then there are various other kind of stable coins. There's a separate blog I had written, and also in the DeFi, there's a full section on stable coins. So Jay has asked, can we create multiple NFTs of the same painting? No, it will be wrong because if you're creating multiple NFTs, then it means there's no one true NFT which is backing that or backed by that painting, right? So idea is one asset will have one unique token that is representing it. I know that, when you take an example of a physical asset, like a physical painting or a physical real estate, it's difficult to appreciate. You take an example of a digital asset. So you attach that asset with the token itself. So who owns the token owns the asset, underlying asset. So one question, is it possible for us to get the security and content moderation in Web3? Yes. So if you see some of the Web3 publishing platforms, like, if you see Publish 0x or you see esteemed, so there are quite a few, and one of the current ones is, so there are already quite a few medium type content publishing platforms. And then of course, there are various platforms which are like YouTube and social platforms also. So these platforms have already started coming in. And then slowly we are going to see that some of the traditional platforms are going to upgrade, because it's not that, it's not this versus this, but yes, some lot of exciting Web3 startups are there who are redefining the whole creator economy, where you connect your wallet, you contribute your content. People, if based on how many people are reading that content, how many are liking it, sharing it, based on, and you can also define if there's a subscription, what kind of share of subscription you would like to have. So you have more control over Web2. So, and as far as moderation, etc. is concerned, all those options are also coming in now. So I think we are already at the end of time. And I'm sorry, normally some of these webinars are overshot by half an hour or so, but I have to catch a flight today. So, but thanks a lot. Very exciting questions, very collaborative discussion. And do follow us and keep in touch. and we'll continue to do exciting webinars. Thanks everyone.